Hi, I'm Michael Whidden, and I'm your host for this show. It's called American Tributaries, and this is our episode one. I live in Brooklyn, New York, where we're doing this recording from. And the impetus for this podcast is to kind of look to the boundaries of my bubble and to kind of go past the boundaries of my bubble. If you're looking for a podcast that's focusing on some kind of interesting niche, this is not for you. We're going to lean in the other direction. We're going to be exploring this vast country of ours of 320 million people, which is the third largest country in the world by population. So it's confounding, it's humongous, and it's something we really can't get a grasp on. I think that's where I want to explore. If you're looking for politics, this is not for you as well. The premise here is to learn about everyday Americans, learn about the people that make up this country. And to me, the politics is kind of a manifestation of that. But that's an afterthought. If you're looking for celebrities, this is not about celebrities or at least bold-faced names. This is about the everyday Americans who I believe really should be the celebrities. But who is this for? This is for people who are curious about the world beyond them. This is people who are open-minded enough to kind of consider those lives, those existences beyond where they live and how they live. This is people who are looking for faith in the future, looking for hope, and who believe that the noise that we see in the news, the noise that's out there, is just noise, or at least just one small part of our everyday existence. So this is a podcast where we have no bells and whistles. I've got a $30 light. I've got a $40 microphone. I'm doing this from my 1,100 square foot apartment. So you're going to see the rice cooker. You're going to see the coffee machine. You're going to see the soda stream. You're going to see the dinged up cupboard doors behind me. You might hear some doors slam. There may very well be a child or two that comes in screaming for water or food, or screaming because they scream. So, but with that, I'd like to bring on our first guest, and this is Eric Ireland, and he is a friend of mine from South Carolina. And I guess just a little background: Eric and I met through a group called Braver Angels. But we're not going to talk about politics, as I said, but it's kind of unavoidable here. Braver Angels is a group that was founded in 2016 to build bridges across the political spectrum. I typically vote Democrat. Eric typically votes Republican, but we met through the group, and I think what we found quite quickly was that there was just so much that we could relate to, and so much we had in common, and so much to talk about. And I'd say that really quite quickly, since we first started talking in September of last year, Eric has become one of my favorite people to talk to, and really kind of whenever I finish talking with him, I'm usually at my most hopeful. And I can just say, even for now, if I never got to talk to Eric again, I'd say I would be forever grateful for what we've had so far, but I look forward to more. So with that, Eric, I apologize for the long-winded introduction, but thank you for agreeing to do this first podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm still overwhelmed by your extremely gracious introduction, and I must say that I've benefited and enjoyed tremendously our conversations and what you're doing here and in other things that you're trying to do. I mean, you're trying to make this world a better place, and I'm very thankful that I can play a little part of that of what you're trying to accomplish. So I really appreciate that.
No, well, thank you. But I think it's really been, I think, an evolution. And sometimes I wish that I would have learned more sooner, just not even learn specific facts,
Yeah.
but learn about perspectives. But I appreciate the fact that we're doing this now, and and I've learned a lot just from the beginning. I mean, honestly, we've looked at real estate listings in South Carolina just to look at what life is like there, and I think, to me, one of the things that I always find really amazing is how much our surroundings that we take for granted shape who we are so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just kind of wondering, like, so what's it like? You live in Simpsonville, which is outside of Greenville, and how would you describe that for people who aren't maybe not too familiar with South Carolina? Like, where is that
Yeah.
exactly, and what's it like around you?
So when people think about the geography of South Carolina, it's kind of three zones. There's the
Mm-hmm.
coastal zone, which is along the Atlantic Ocean, and that's where Myrtle Beach, for folks on the East Coast, will be familiar with that, and Charleston down south. So very coastal, very flat. If you can't smell the beach, you kind of sense there's a beach probably close by when you're in the lowlands. Then there's the Midlands, which is also flat, but you're going to get a lot more hills and such. And then as you get to the where I'm at is called the Upcountry or Upstate of South Carolina. Now you're
Mm-hmm.
getting more into the foothills, and you're starting to get into the Blue Ridge Mountains. So
Mm-hmm.
where I'm at, which is in Greenville,
Mm-hmm.
you're in the foothills. I can drive a few miles from my house and see the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, I think living here, if you think about kind of the geography or the topography, or what it feels like to live here,
Mm-hmm.
Greenville is a very growing city, and
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina is very growing as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it, from an outdoor standpoint, if you're here, you've got access to everything. You
Mm-hmm.
feel very free. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we've got I'm less than an hour from lakes, from
Mm-hmm.
mountains, from rivers. I'm about 3 hours from the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And all in between. We even have a place you can go skiing about 3 hours from here. It's not going to rival Colorado or anything,
Uh,
but so it's from an outdoor standpoint, from a geography standpoint, you feel like it feels very open and
mm-hmm.
very accessible here.
Mm-hmm. And have you lived there your entire life?
No, so I was pretty much raised here, and
Mm-hmm.
this is absolutely my home. We moved here from Alabama when I was 5,
Mm-hmm.
and then our family had the opportunity to live in South Africa in the '80s for a couple of
Oh
years. So we
wow.
moved there.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Wofford College, which is a here in upstate in Spartanburg.
Mm-hmm.
And following graduation, and my wife and I, we got married about 2 years after I graduated. We moved to Ohio for 14 years.
Oh wow.
And then, we had kids and all of our families in South Carolina. So,
Mm-hmm.
and we loved Ohio. We lived in the Columbus area,
Mm-hmm.
Powell specifically for anybody that
Mm-hmm.
knows that area. Loved it. And always, but all of our family was down in South Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no way we could carve out Columbus and dump it in South Carolina. So we
Mm-hmm.
moved back to South Carolina in 2008,
Mm-hmm.
and been here ever since.
Wow. And then, and how would you, when you lived, like living in Ohio, were there things about South Carolina or your home that you had never really appreciated until you were living away from there, or was it just kind of like a change in existence but no other insights?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, in terms of the temperament of people, I found
Mm-hmm.
Midwesterners, which Ohio really is, especially Columbus in that area, to be
Mm-hmm.
very similar to the Southerners.
Mm-hmm.
Just that kind of a little laid back, very polite. Just kind of those typical things that you typically associate with the like kind of the Southern manner.
Right.
Um, One of the big shocks was how much people knew about South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
When we first moved up there, I saw more Myrtle Beach and South Carolina Palmetto stickers and all in
Mm-hmm.
Ohio than I did here. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, it's kind of a running joke in South Carolina, and I think kind of in Ohio too, about all the people that come in, on vacation from Ohio and move back up there. In terms of like really like differences and all. No, I mean there weren't stark differences.
Mm-hmm.
You get the as you do anywhere, you get differences in personality.
Mm-hmm.
Differences in how in people's lifestyles and such. So a lot of variety in that,
Mm-hmm.
but you get that in both areas. Now
Right.
I live in the in a city area, and Columbus is a city area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you went from Columbus and you went to a rural place in South Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and then vice versa, you would find much different. I think you would
Mm-hmm.
much more of a rural. Everybody kind of knows everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Much more community focused. Kind of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, both states have their own personality in general, but then within each of those states, you would have different personalities, depending
Mm-hmm.
on where you are. And, the personality of the folks here in South Carolina that are in Greenville, it's much more business oriented. Our history is
Hmm.
much more business oriented,
Hmm.
kind of more of a progressive bent.
Hmm.
Very, a lot of development. Um, we have a history, but it's not like when you go to Charleston, for instance, where
Right.
history runs deep. And I know you spent some time in Charleston. When you go to Charleston, history is very deep there.
Hmm.
And so when you're living in Charleston, you're always aware of that history and that importance.
Yeah. Yeah. The one of the things that one of the things I was thinking about was just from a New Yorker standpoint. I was talking to a friend about this. New Yorkers have the reputation of being very kind of like, I don't know, pushy or aggressive or like impatient. And what one of the things I think is that for like New Yorkers, one of the reasons for that is that a lot of people are really reliant on the subways. Like if you drive around the
Yeah,
city, you
yeah,
could be stuck in traffic for hours. And when you end up becoming pushy as you rush on the streets and get around from point A to point B, is that the subways only come every 3, 5, 10 minutes. And what you find up, and you only need this to happen once or twice, is if you have the subway doors kind of close on you and you miss it by like 2 seconds, and then you got to
yeah,
wait 10 minutes, it's so aggravating to you that it throws off your schedule. So that what I
yeah,
think as a New Yorker, at some point it gets kind of bred into you that if that door is going to close on your face, you want to be able to kind of hold your head up high and know that you did all that you could. So I think
yeah,
as a New Yorker, that's what ends up pushing you to be more pushy. I think to a fault sometimes, but I don't think I think that, and there's other reasons why people become that way. But I don't know that I would say New Yorkers are like fundamentally pushy, impatient people. I think that they become kind of becomes an outgrowth of where you live. So I think that helps makes me think about like kind of like your lives or anybody who doesn't live in this kind of setting
yeah.
about like what it's like kind of getting around. So like what is the tempo of like what's your everyday life like? Like is
Yeah.
there a set schedule? Are you jerked around a lot as far as I gotta do this instead of that, and you're always
Yeah.
in a rush? Like what's life like?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I touch on that, I got to share with you. So in the Greenville area, we have people coming from all over the country. Right?
Hmm.
And so what's interesting is, so we had some people that just moved in our neighborhood from Vermont, and honestly, I couldn't place them anywhere. I mean, I knew
Hmm.
they weren't from the South but I couldn't really place them anywhere.
Hmm.
But if they come from New Jersey,
Hmm.
or if they come from New York, the city of
Hmm.
New York, or like
Hmm.
a Philadelphia,
Hmm.
you do notice there's a very nice people, but there's an assertiveness about them that is very like you notice it immediately. Like they're very assertive, and so it's like, all right, it's one of these big cities you're from. I don't know which one it is, but it's one of them. It's not upstate New York. It's and so it's just and we're seeing that more and more here in South Carolina as folks come. Then folks that are coming in from California, they have
Hmm.
this very laid back vibe about them, And so
Yeah.
there's like certain places in the country, like okay, I know they're from that place, I know they're from that place, but then there's a lot of places you just you're like, I know you're not from around here, but I can't really. So the pace of life here is going to be very similar to a not a big city like New York, but
Hmm.
a probably like a medium sized city.
Hmm.
And so most folks are in the 8 to 5 jobs, that get
Hmm.
those types of jobs. There's a lot
Hmm.
of industry in upstate South Carolina, a lot of
Hmm.
corporate jobs. So it's not unusual for people to be in the professions, either in the service industry. We also have a lot of manufacturing here. So it's
Hmm.
a very diversified economy up here.
Hmm.
And so you've got all different types of classes, all different types of, backgrounds and work backgrounds. So it's a
Hmm.
very diverse, from that standpoint, from a racial standpoint, extremely diverse as well.
Hmm.
And we also have, the kind of a growing community from Asia as well that's here. So
Hmm.
I know when folks think of the South, and especially South Carolina, which is considered like very South, the picture is is probably one of more from the 1950s, I would think, or
Mm-hmm.
even earlier than when you come here and you realize, wow, this is Starbucks on every corner, and
For better or
the big
worse.
shopping malls, the shopping
Mm-hmm.
and the call, and all that. And so because of how we're situated here, there's a lot of outdoor activities that people do. That's very
Mm-hmm.
popular here.
Mm-hmm.
We're all big fans of the two teams, the Atlanta teams and the Charlotte, the
Mm-hmm.
Hornets and the Panthers are the teams that we follow, and then
Mm-hmm.
Clemson football and USC Gamecocks.
Mm-hmm.
That's the water cooler talk, the sports talk. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
revolves around those teams,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a lot of transplants from different places, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll be flying their team's colors and trying to figure out how we can be so rabid here about Clemson and USC and all
Mm-hmm.
that. So I think the day in the life, we have everything. You have your rural areas, you have your suburbs, and you have your city life.
Mm-hmm.
Though not as large as yours, would mimic anywhere that you'd find in the United States. And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, I think it's always kind of funny when and I do have the opportunity to travel throughout the country. It's like, yeah, there's those strip malls and those areas where you're like, yep, I could close my eyes and be anywhere in the United States right now and see all of those stores, the
Yep.
same style configuration.
Yep.
That's here too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so let's look Clemson and South Carolina. Like, so college sports is not something that your average New Yorker who's grown up in the area kind of, I think, has the passion that I
Oh,
think you're
oh,
alluding
really?
to. I
Yeah.
mean, so I'm just kind of wondering, like, is how does that start? Are you like, because like in New York at least, you become, I think, very identified with the professional sports teams.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and colleges, like, there may be some affinity because you went there or it's in your neighborhood, but there's certainly not the I think the passion that is down there. Is that something that
Yeah.
starts when you're born? Like, how does that
Before you can
evolve?
remember.
Is that
Before you
right?
can remember. Yeah.
uh,
College. Yeah. So, and probably because we haven't had sports teams here. Really, I mean, we had the Atlanta Falcons, come back,
mm,
from the '70s on, but we really don't have a history of professional sports teams around here. That's really been
mm,
recent.
mm,
So, folks, the SEC and the ACC in terms of football is huge. Yeah, everything that people say about
mm,
the SEC country
mm,
is absolutely true. Football
mm,
season is the sport that people look forward to. And if you're in
mm,
the upstate of South Carolina and you've been here for a while, you
mm,
either root for Clemson or the Gamecocks, or you're just completely fed
mm.
up with both sides. There is there's a bar that's about a mile and a half from my house. It's called House Divided, and it's
uh,
Clemson and USC.
uh,
So that's a big part of the culture down here, is
mm,
especially during college football season. But then throughout the year, if you walk through a mall or downtown Greenville or something like that, you're going to see a decent percentage that are wearing some kind of a logos or T-shirts or something. So it's fun.
mm,
It's college football rivalry kind of fun stuff,
mm,
and it is a very noticeable part of the culture and what folks do down here. Now,
mm,
Clemson is only 40 minutes from us, and they
mm,
have a satellite campus in downtown Greenville, as well as I
mm,
think their MBA program might be located in downtown Greenville. So they have, when you're in downtown Greenville, there is a real Clemson presence, as well as
mm,
some other activities they have here. So
mm.
when you hear about Clemson football, just know, in Greenville, it's a big deal,
Uh-huh.
in the upstate,
Uh,
and college football in general is a big deal in the upstate of South Carolina, definitely into the Midlands where
mhm,
Columbia and the Gamecocks are.
mhm,
As I think about it, I'm not so sure along the coast if it is as big a deal as it is up here, but certainly, we're
mhm,
close to the Georgia Bulldogs, we're close to
mhm,
Auburn and all
mhm.
that. So you kind of grow up in that atmosphere and
Yeah.
live in that atmosphere.
Did you play football growing up?
Oh, no way. No, no. I love that you think I would have, that I could have. No, I did not have the as my mom will tell everybody, the Ireland family, athletic capability was not big in our family. And I played tennis and
uh,
baseball and played soccer for a number of years.
uh,
And in fact, was there when the really kind of the first teams were started. First soccer teams were started here
mm,
in the local area.
mm,
Participated in that, and at least in the upstate, it was kind of on the ground floor of a lot of that. We're the Michelin and BMW's North American headquarters are here in Greenville.
mm-hmm,
So that's also a big influence here. So you have a
mm-hmm,
number, one thing I haven't shared is,
mm-hmm,
there's a lot of folks from other countries here too that
mm-hmm,
live here, especially, German, French. And so that's been a real influence. And
mm-hmm,
so if you go to downtown Greenville and walk around downtown Greenville, if you kind of close your eyes, and kind of open them again and want to picture yourself in a small European village,
mm-hmm,
walking down the main street, with all the little shops,
mm-hmm.
it's easy to do. And, you
Really?
see that European influence here
Mm-hmm,
because we have such large European, obviously European corporations that are located here and headquartered here and have sizable workforces, here in this area.
wow. No, I didn't know that both BMW and
Yeah,
Michelin had
yeah,
their North American
yeah.
headquarters there.
Their headquarters are about 5 miles from each other on Interstate 85. Uh,
Wow.
not too far from here. Yeah,
And you work for Michelin, right?
I do. Yep, yep.
And how long have
Very
you been
proud.
with them?
Very proud of
How
that. Yeah.
how long have you been with them?
I have just celebrated my 10-year anniversary with them. Yeah.
Wow. Does that seem like a long time or a really fast time?
I have a kid that one of my kids just started college, and I remember
Mm.
my father saying, when you have kids, the old saying, the days are long and the years are short.
Oh yeah.
So every year accelerates. So this last
Hmm.
10 years has gone by, extremely quickly.
Hmm.
I still have one in high school, but it is amazing, how time, how all that accelerates. And that's, you talk about commonalities in different areas, and that is one of those common. Yeah, everybody has the same story. We all have. It's fun getting. No matter where you are in the country, it's like we all have the same stories and commiserations about,
Hmm.
with the joys and the challenges of raising kids, and all the wonderful things that does to you and does for you, and the few things that, it challenges you with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I remember. I think you had said that having children humbles you. I think we said that in our last talk.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Yeah.
and it really does, because you realize how little
Yeah.
control you have. And I think,
Yes.
like, to me, one of the things that I find a fundamental fact that I'll return to is the fact that I can't even get like five people to agree on get out the door at the same time. So when people don't understand why any kind of issue or event doesn't elicit universal support, when like news wise or politics wise, I'm like, come on, like we all share the same DNA. Like my wife
Yeah.
volunteered to spend the rest of her life with me. I volunteered
Yeah.
to spend the rest of our children all have our DNA. Yet we can't
Yeah.
agree on whether or not we're supposed to have chicken nuggets or pizza or order in. Like we can't agree on anything. So
Yeah.
I
Oh,
always
it's
find
so
that kind of
true.
very, it's like kind of like a reminder of, like, the reality of life. And I do find that it's very comforting to like find out that, yeah, anybody anywhere shares those same frustrations.
So
But go on.
I have two kids, and my
Mhm.
parents raised five kids.
Oh wow.
And my dad always remarked, three boys and two girls. And my dad always remarks, and it's so true. He says, it's so striking. Every one of you is so different. Like our
Hmm.
personalities are so different.
Hmm.
And how you can be raised in the same household, exactly what you just said,
Hmm. Hmm.
and but you've got five like completely unique, individuals,
Hmm.
sharing some of the same values, but maybe variations on that.
Hmm.
But very different personalities,
Hmm.
and how all that works. He was always would always remark on that. And it's true. It's true.
What so what is it, so then, like, with a for you and your siblings, since you are all different, like, what do you find that kind of keeps you all together? Is it just been good luck? Is it your parents? Is it there, like, what is it, what's what does keep you all together despite those
Wow,
differences?
what a great question. I so it's so there's five of us. We're all married, and everybody gets along really well. And it's
Hmm.
just it's a very there's none of that. Not that we don't have our disagreements from time to time, but there really is just a good environment.
Hmm.
And I, all I can say is that I think as we were growing up, we all felt very loved by
Hmm.
our parents. You
Hmm.
know, come what may, and we would always, we would bump heads. We were teenagers, we would have our, teenage things and all that kind of stuff. But I think we always knew that we were the most important thing to them.
Hmm.
That we were very loved, and I think they also gave us, a Christian faith,
Hmm.
that kind of surrounded and bonded people. And
Hmm.
so as we've moved on, I think that foundation keeps you together.
Hmm.
And so the family had a strong foundation, and then the people that we married were all very consistent with that,
Hmm.
and so it just kind of works.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's the only thing, that's what I would put it to. Maybe that and just some luck here and there.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but but that's it. Just kind of a good foundation. And so as life's going to rock you. Yeah,
Hmm.
here and there from time to time. But if you've got that really solid foundation that was laid,
Hmm.
you're going to be able to weather those things. So I'm going to
Yeah.
think more about that. That's a great question. You definitely didn't prep me ahead of time for these,
No.
and no, that's a good one. I like, yeah,
Yeah, I'm just looking for answers. Yeah,
yeah,
I think for our family, I feel like, to the extent nobody's kind of run away from home, and I'm
well,
still happily married. I find that what kind of probably keeps us together is actually sometimes the fact that, like, we do have fights, but we always, like, kind of come back together. Especially during, like, the last few years when we were all stuck in, like, this 1100 square foot apartment. There were plenty of times where I think we were kind of driving each other a bit crazy, and I tried to always kind of, after things cool down, like, I try to take the mantra of, like, we're all trying to figure this out. Like, where you have to learn to say you're sorry, and that goes not just one way but
yeah,
two ways. And then kind of just saying, like, look, I don't. We're learning. I've never had a 14-year-old daughter before, or an 8-year-old son, or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
uh, and I've never been 50 years old and this level of exhaustion in the middle of a pandemic, or working hard this week, or whatever it is. And kind of trying to make sure they understand that, like, we're all in this together. And I think sometimes it's hard to be, to admit that you did something wrong. I find that that's usually, like, the hardest thing to do. And a lot of times I
oh,
think when
absolutely,
we do have
yeah,
those blow
yeah,
ups, it's more like agonizing myself, being like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And it takes a hard time just to realize, no, that was my fault, and now I have to apologize. And I don't want
yeah,
to, but I feel like I feel like the bonds get stronger actually when you kind of stretch them a little
yeah.
bit, as long as everybody feels comfortable enough to know that we're still in this together.
Yeah, and just think about what you communicate to your kids when you're doing that. When you say, "Hey, dad here, mom here, the big men and women on campus, are sorry, and kind of humbling
Yeah.
ourselves." Yeah, I mean that sends a huge message. My I think I'm sure my parents, when they were raising us, there were times when they thought, "Oh my gosh, the wheels are going to fall off," or we're going to lose
Mm.
this kid or that kid, or something like that.
Mm.
Um, and then you kind of work through all that, and that foundation is laid, the kinds of things that you're talking about lay that foundation, and it sort of works out. I will say though, I think looking at kind of our extended families and such,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that helped was several of us are fairly close still. I mean, we all get along
Mm-hmm.
well, so that's good, but we're also stayed fairly close.
Mm-hmm.
And the siblings that are the two that are farther away, they're intentional about staying in touch,
That's
about
great.
visiting, or we're doing a lot of Zooming and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And in our extended family, I've seen where the family starts to splinter a little bit, like the bonds
Mm-hmm.
are still there. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like a negative splintering, but they kind of drift away because of space. People move
Yeah.
away, get involved in stuff, and don't actively cultivate those bonds.
Yeah.
And so you're still family, you're still connected and all, but you do have to, especially nowadays with people physically moving so much and a lot going on.
Yeah.
You do have to just very intentionally cultivate those bonds. And in fact, there's some cousins that were very close to, a whole set of them, actually a whole bunch of on one side of the family that we're going to get together with later this year. And because we'd realize, hey, it's been a couple of years since we've gotten together, and we don't want those bonds that we've established over so many years to fray. So we're going to make sure we get together. So
Yeah.
that's the one thing I think, you got a good foundation, but then over time, especially when everybody moves away and stuff, you've got to really be intentional about, keeping it together, keeping people together and all. Yeah.
Yeah. So your daughter is away at school. It's her freshman year,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
and how far away is she?
She's about 7 hours
Okay.
away. So, and she was one of those that knew early on, in her mind, for her college experience, she needed to be away from home. She needed to feel
Mm-hmm.
independent, and feel like she was striking out on her own. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been a thrill,
Mm-hmm.
seeing her and how she's handling university life and what all she's doing there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she comes, it's neat because now she comes home, and when she visits, it's like this thing you look. So it was really sad when she left,
Yeah.
but then you get the benefit of now having something to look forward to. Her coming back. When she comes
Mm-hmm.
back, it's so great, and then when she leaves, it's so sad again. So we go through
Yeah.
that. And then we have our son is still at home, and
Mm-hmm.
so he gets our full attention. Now, which I'm sure he enjoys to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
and to some extent maybe not.
Yeah.
And we're Lisa, my wife, and I are like, okay, we got 2 more years of Eli at home. And I think I think we really have appreciated when we were all together, and now
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to appreciate even more. Eli's here. 2 more years with him, and then we'll see what life has in store for him. I'm a few years ahead of you on that, but your time is coming, and it's going to come fast. It's going to come very fast.
I get that sense. Were you did you have mixed feelings about your daughter going 7 hours away? Were you kind of were you planting subliminal hints that
Yeah.
Clemson would be a really great choice?
No, no. She's got a good head on her shoulders,
Hmm.
and so I have a lot of confidence that you know whatever path she takes and however it goes is going to turn out well. So
Hmm.
no, I felt like she knew what she was doing,
Hmm.
and so far it seems to be holding out. One of our parental screw ups was this was several years ago when we're trying to figure out what high school to send her
Hmm.
to, and we said, you're going to be able to make the decision of where you go to school. It's your
Hmm.
decision. And so she made her decision, very strong in her decision, but it
Hmm.
wasn't the decision that I wanted her to make. And so, to her credit, so
Hmm.
we ended up sending her where I wanted her to go, and have her mom wanted her to go.
Hmm.
And to her credit, she made the absolute best, and I think really enjoyed her experience at that high school.
Hmm.
But she trusted us that like she was annoyed with us, and we totally botched it. I mean, we just, if we had already decided where we wanted her to go, then that's what we needed to do. We didn't need to go through
Right.
all this, misery, and that was the
Yeah.
feedback she gave us was, it's not that I have a problem. It's just that why did we go through this drama? If this
Yeah.
is what was the answer anyway. And it was great
Right.
feedback. And to your
Right.
point earlier about being humble, I mean, like we took it. It was like, yep, you're exactly right. But to her credit, a lot of people could have been just, kind of pissy about it and, well, I'll show,
Yeah.
and she didn't know. She went and she made the absolute most of her time and experience there. And so that's when I say she's got a good head on her shoulders.
Yeah.
She thinks, she makes good decisions for herself,
Yeah.
and so I just have confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because one of the things that I find about judging people, and it includes kids, is a lot of times it's a throwaway. It's something that you don't think is like relevant. Like to her, she
Yeah.
might not realize how much that mattered to you because like,
Yeah.
oh, like that's, yeah. And I think that's what I try to be in tune of. It's like it's the little things that people don't think are important that actually says a lot. So I mean, kudos to her to having that kind of maturity.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And my son here recently just shared a couple things with us, and to your point, like I mean, you're kind of blown away. It's like, man, he's picking up on that, and he's thinking about that in that way. That is dang impressive. And then, and it's also humbling to, it's amazing too, because when I realized, and I said this to my wife the other day, I was like, I was probably in my 30s when I started thinking like that, and he's already there, when he has that kind of mental maturity or whatever you want to call it, to kind of see certain things and relationships and how they work. And you're probably seeing that a little bit with your kids now, and you'll see more of it as they get older and they mature, is like, wow, wow, where did that come from? It's really neat.
Yeah. One of the things that I remember with my daughter is one time she went to a friend's house and whoever was hosting them made them some kind of like, I don't know, some weird Swedish breakfast or something. I don't know what it was, but Miranda's like, oh, well, I tried it, and it was like it's a little thing, but to me, I was just like, I'm glad that you tried. I'm not expecting you to like it, but I think, and it was another thing where one time we were talking. Oh, we heard her advising one of her friends, and she was advising her friends with words that she's heard from us at it, countless times. And
Oh,
you're like,
really?
is this penetrating? But then you're like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
she actually not only did she take it to heart, despite what she may lead us to think when you're talking with her, but she actually felt it worthy of sharing with a friend. So again,
Isn't
I
that
think
the
just with
best?
those, yeah, you're like, darn, I might not get an F in this parenting thing. Like maybe I'll get at least a gentleman's C.
No, well done, man. No, that is no, that's awesome. Especially that, it's that valid. You're right. Like there is no higher honor than when a kid passes along to their friends advice that you've given them. I mean, what higher parenting honor can you get?
Right.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I mean, up in New York, what are the big challenges for you guys up there? Like at the age with your kids now, what is it that you guys struggle with?
Well, I think the one thing that seems utterly like mind blowing to like, I mean, anybody unless you're living here, and even when you're living here until it starts happening, is like, kids in the city, like they have to get around by themselves. Like, even just like, for going to school, coming out of elementary school, you don't feed into the same middle school. Like you start applying for schools as a fifth grader. Where do you want to go? And there's upsides and downsides to it. And I think when you choose to raise your family in the city, you're kind of aware of like, okay, this is what we're going to be doing. And the upside is like, the kids get to like, they're learning a lot earlier how to socialize. Like for me, I think I went to college and I was still not used to the idea of meeting strangers. And, our children in sixth grade are being dropped into a middle school where they don't know 90% of the kids, 95% of the kids. So it kind of forces them to socialize at a far more advanced level than like I did. And the other part is like they go to these schools and they have to take mass transit by themselves. So usually, and for us at least, they take the bus in sixth grade, but then seventh grade they start taking subways. And it seems like unfathomable to somebody who doesn't live in the city. Like, oh my God, how can you let kids live in the city, on the subway, on the subways? But that's just what they have to do. And people will
Yeah.
see news about bad things happening on the subways, but it's as to a New Yorker, it's really no different than if you rely on a car and you hear about car crashes all the time. That doesn't
Yeah.
change the fact that you still got to use your car to get around. And I think as a
Yeah.
New
Yeah.
Yorker, you're just used to the subways, and they're an amazing way
Okay.
to get around the city because you can get almost anywhere for $2.75.
Well, that's a whole different mode of operating than what we'd have here. So
Yeah,
here it's you're carpooling until your kid can drive.
yeah,
It's carpooling, or you're doing it yourself, or you're carpooling, or what have you,
yeah,
or the bus, or if you're lucky that you've got a school that's that you're on a good bus route, they'll take the bus in, but it's a very contained,
yeah,
obviously, so we don't have maybe those. But you're right, so when I hear subway, it kind of makes me nervous and all, but my kids both, to get to school, were going down interstates,
mm,
at very young ages.
right,
So, I don't know what the statistics are. I don't think I want to know, but you're right. I mean, it's just, but that's what we're used to. I mean, it doesn't occur to me that that's a thing. And I hear about subways and I'm like, oh my gosh. But yeah, you
yeah.
probably are thinking, what? Your 16-year-old kid is driving down an interstate every day at 7:30 a.m. What? And so,
I
yeah,
think that it's just the fundamental truth is, as a parent, whenever your child leaves, you're going to have some
yeah,
level of some reason to be
yeah,
anxious.
yeah,
So it's, I think we all kind of like learn to live with that. But I guess those are probably the biggest, like, I mean, the biggest differences. I mean, otherwise, there's more for kids to do. And I think from out of the city, it might seem like there's like dangerous things, but like, usually like just ends up being like my daughter asks for more money to go out to eat someplace because like the
yeah,
kids don't really have like there's not a lot of like things to do other than kind of go have coffee someplace, and you
yeah,
quickly start doing things that you're like, wait, I was 22 when I was doing that. But it's not like it's like advanced, like mature things they shouldn't be doing. It's just
yeah.
that's what you do. So
It's just
it's
different. Yeah,
yeah. So and there's not like the one of the things that I definitely miss, or is because I grew up in the suburbs of New York, was like just the ability to kind of like go out and throw a baseball by just kind of like going, opening your front door and going out, or opening your
yeah,
back door and going out. Like
yeah,
that you don't have, because outside of our apartment building is, a cobblestone street with cars parked
yeah,
on both sides of the road and about 12 feet between those cars. It's like threading a
yeah,
needle when you drive through. So
yeah,
like that's probably the part that I'd say I wish you could do, but otherwise it's I think we're all the same concerns and worries.
yeah. So I grew up in the town that I basically raised my kids in, and
Mm,
when we were growing up, especially in the summertime, my mother had no idea where I was from about
yep.
8:30 until 5 or 6, and we had lived in a neighborhood that butted up against woods, and so we go out play in the woods, but we would ride bikes all the way down to into the local small town. I mean, we'd be
Mm,
all over the place
yeah.
and totally free, and
Yeah.
parents not knowing where you are and all that. And so nowadays, my kids have a phone. I know where they are. I can know where they are anywhere at any time. And now they're older and they're driving. So, but when they were 10, 11, 12, what have you, there was no way I
Mm,
would let them kind of out of my sight, or out of my
yeah.
range, and it's sad because I know that I think statistically it's probably no better or worse now than it was when we were younger.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're just more aware of things, and as a parent, once you're aware of certain things, it just becomes very hard not to be aware of those anymore, and
Right.
to and to and to manage those. And so one of the things we tried to do was push against that as much as possible, and um, not like go go go, as much as just push on that. It's interesting, just like the generations. I was doing this workshop at a local college recently.
Hmm.
We're interacting with the students who were fantastic, and
Hmm.
it was about like basic kind of like communication, dialogue, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Skills. To help people have really like effective dialogues and such. And so afterward, we were kind of debriefing, and one of the folks was saying, the thing is nowadays, people talk face to face and all,
Hmm.
but 40% of the communication is texting.
Yeah.
And so it used to be what 80%, you know, was 80 to 90%, actually probably 90% was verbal, face to face, or definitely verbal at a minimum,
Right.
with maybe letter writing filling in the other 10%. And so it really kind of struck me. It was like sort of I knew that, but like wow, really, it really struck me that the way kids interact nowadays, communicate, share, stories, gossip, or whatever,
Hmm.
is so different, or is quite different because, uh, when you're texting, you're missing out on a lot of that communication. All those nonverbals, you're missing
Yeah.
out on. And
Yeah.
so, like, what does that do to communication?
Right.
And so it's going to be interesting to see how that. I'm sure sociologists are going to have a field day, in 50 years from now, plotting how the impact of smartphones and the communication revolution, what that did,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But it really struck me, how my kids are growing up in a socializing environment that is definitely, to some degrees, different than the one I or you grew up in.
Yeah. No. The I think it's easy to also sometimes, I guess, like, I think you can think about it as like a good or a bad thing, or and there's certainly, I think, different things that may be bad, but honestly, like, just our friendship has been facilitated by technology,
Yes.
and I think that there's
Yep.
the tech, like, I think that there's lots of benefits to that as well, and I think that sometimes, like, the solution to the problem is the source of the problem. Like, I think we are, like, really fortunate to have the opportunity to be able to, for me to be able to meet you
Yeah.
and become
Yeah.
friends with
No,
you
you're right. You're
is
right.
because
You're
of
right.
Zoom and phone calls. And hearing about Braver Angels was through, I'm sure, somebody texted me or Instagram messaged me or whatever it is to let me know about something. So I think there's a lot of kind of like positive things, and like, what I guess what we've been doing and what we're trying to do here is just kind of use that technology to kind of for good. And I think that even like the texting, like with the kids, I think like our kids, they go through, I've seen our kids kind of go through like a learning process, and I think it's different. But the kids are on a group text, and there's stupid things that kids talk about, and there are things that are
Yeah.
inappropriate, but they also look more glaring when you see it in black and white, and they're learning to use
Mhm.
that. But I have
Yeah.
a friend who like works for Facebook, and he had said like he thinks that the younger generation is going to know how to use the technology better than us, like, old people, because
Yeah.
it's more
That's
part
makes
of their
yeah.
lives. They've already worked that out. We're looking at Facebook and all this stuff as if we're reading the newspapers or whatever, but we're reacting to it differently than kids who, like, our kids, like, they don't even know of a world that doesn't have iPhones. Like, that's utterly
Yeah.
amazing. Like, for when you and I were growing up, that's like Star Trek level stuff, like talking into a little rectangle thing that lets you see people and talk to people and play. It's crazy.
Yeah, you
So.
think about you are walking around, and how quickly it happened and how revolutionary it is. Where as you walk, you can speak to anybody anywhere in the world
Mhm.
at any time, and
Yeah.
you can get the answers to about just about any question anywhere in the world at any time.
Yeah.
And that it's how revolutionary that is, but also how adaptable. I mean, think about that. Think about how, as much as we talk about the problems and all, how
Mhm.
well we have adapted to them. I mean, we have a lot of problems and all, but we've gone through such tremendous changes in such a
Yeah.
short amount of time.
Yeah.
And in some ways, you can look at it and say, "Man, they're remarkable for being able to navigate so many different things." And
Yeah.
actually, one of the things we have to navigate is um, we don't want.
Mhm.
We don't fear. And if,
Mhm.
if you live in the United States, with the exception of essentially a small majority, a small minority of folks, you're not worrying about food, shelter, medicine, physical safety, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge population that never has that stress, and so that's great. But then
Right.
it also has some downsides too. It allows you to kind of divorce from certain things and certain realities that are out there, and
Mm-hmm.
so like with anything, it's a mixed bag. But it's in some ways I kind of step back, and I find it remarkable how much um, how 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 well we've done, given so many challenges and all.
Yeah. No, it, to your point, I think about how, we're inundated with information from so many places that to the fact that maybe it's a bit overwhelming and you don't even know what kind of to look to is kind of like it's a natural
Mm.
process to it. And I think, trying to figure out, like, I don't know, like, to me, I think the human mind and human motion is meant to kind of survive in some kind of like, primitive, like, village of 200 people, and we're now getting hit with millions of thoughts and
Yeah,
views and existences. And like, I've been trying to kind of just boil it down to, and I guess that's what I'm doing with this podcast, just boil it down to just one person at a time and just people at a
yeah,
time. And once we can kind of frame people, I think, in a more truthful way, it'll be easier. And I think that it's been great. Before we close up, because I know you've got other things to do, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Greenville, because a good friend of mine
yeah.
had said that that was like the most beautiful place on earth. So I was
Oh,
just
wow.
kind of wondering, like what's, I guess, what about Greenville do you think would strike somebody that way?
Well, and so we'll say Greenville, and then I'll take you around it. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're in downtown Greenville,
Mm-hmm.
you've got a main street that goes about 2 miles.
Mm-hmm.
That on either side of it are all different types of cute little shops, bars, and restaurants, and side streets that are the same.
Mm-hmm.
And then halfway down, there's the Peace Center, which is a big arts center.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll go down a little bit farther, and there's a beautiful park that's next to a river called the Reedy River that runs right through, kind of bisects Greenville.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a beautiful park that's there, and a beautiful walkway along the river, on either side. There's
Mm-hmm.
then a biking trail that takes you on up to what's called Traveler's Rest as you head up toward the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And I should say, to me, this is one of the most beautiful drives. As you're driving into Greenville on 385,
Mm-hmm.
you look over to the right and you see the Smoky Mountains, the Blue Ridge
Mm-hmm.
Smoky Mountains, off to the right. And so as you're
Mm-hmm.
going in, you've got that beautiful image.
Wow.
So that's downtown Greenville. It is a quaint isn't the right word. It's quaint seems kind of like it is a walkable, charming, modern downtown that's beautiful, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very well put together and thought. Oh, and if you keep walking down, there's a baseball stadium toward the end.
Right.
There's theater. There's going to be people out, entertainers and performers and all that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a farmers market on Saturday morning. There's
Mm-hmm.
always events and things going on in downtown Greenville. So
Mm-hmm.
so that's downtown Greenville and what makes it
Mm-hmm.
attractive. And in fact, my wife and I, so we live about a 20-minute drive from downtown Greenville, but are and love where we live, but have talked about, should we get like a condo, or, you know, when our last child is out of the house, move to
Mm-hmm.
downtown Green, just experience
Mm-hmm.
that life.
Yeah.
So that's downtown Greenville, and then in the surrounding area, you've got Paris Mountain, which is
Mm-hmm.
just outside of downtown Greenville, and it is a pretty high. It's a big hill. All right,
Mm-hmm.
it's a really big hill that
Mm-hmm.
mountain biking and hiking and camping and all of that. So that's right next to it. And then you are literally minutes, from starting to get up into the mountains. And so you have, if you like biking and that sort of thing, it's fantastic. A huge biking community here. When I say like bicycles,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of rivers, and so you've got the those kinds of sports, and then within an hour of here, there are three lakes: Hartwell, Kiowee, and Jocassee,
Mm-hmm.
all beautiful. Jocassee, I think, is like National Geographic had it as one of the top 10 most scenic places in the United States, Lake
Mm-hmm.
Jocassee.
Wow.
It is beautiful. And it's got a lot of waterfalls that fall into it. So and very little development on the lake. So
Mm-hmm.
you get a boat, you rent a boat, get a kayak, and you just go and you just look at these beautiful waterfalls on this beautiful lake that's framed by the Blue Ridge Mountains. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, so and you're not very far from mountains. If you really want to get up into the mountains, it's about,
Mm-hmm.
within 2 hours, you're like really in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then you've got the ocean, which is about 3 hours away. So, Greenville has been discovered. We
Mm-hmm.
got discovered about 15 years ago. It's always been a great place. But
Mm-hmm.
if you read like, best places to live in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
best places, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
This is, you're going to see Greenville's name on it.
Mm-hmm.
And like when we were living in Columbus and we were telling our friends up there that we're moving, to Greenville and back to South Carolina and all, and we would start to kind of go into our explanation. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like, you don't have to explain anything. That's where everybody goes to vacation, So,
Mm-hmm.
you've also got, that vibe. You've
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of just really great, beautiful places, and the people are wonderful. It's still got that southern. I'll go into a lot of restaurants and all. I'm still called honey and sweetie, and
Uh-huh.
especially when you get out into the rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
It's even more pronounced. Just that that slower way of life.
Mm-hmm.
People take time for people, and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of, that kind of sensibility. So, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I know, I know that as a New Yorker, I've felt like I went to it was in California, but we went to an Anaheim Angels game, and at the concession stand, the people were like friendly and chatty, and it was like it's a little off-putting. It's like we're having a conversation,
I know.
and I know that like I have friends that just moved down to Florida, and they were like, yeah, the people are so friendly. I think what I would say is in New York is that there's so many people around usually that
Yeah,
usually like you just like it would be I definitely think like if somebody starts talking to you out of the blue, usually what's like what's going on
yeah,
because there's just so many people you cross paths with that you have your guard up a little bit more. But what I've always found, and like my job is selling wine, so I go to restaurants and I'll be sitting at a bar, is that I love getting to know people that like
yeah,
I don't know and just kind of learning their stories. So um, it's there, and with the great thing in living in a city of like 7 million people is that like you can learn forever.
yeah,
But I think like you also can kind of get um, tricked into thinking that this is everything.
yeah.
And that's where I think like I guess the impetus of this podcast is like, there's a lot here, but there's so much more out there, and most of the world is not living the way we choose to live in New York, and there's lots of other ways to kind of to live it. So I
Hmm.
love like being able to kind of like step into your shoes and just kind of thinking about life in a different setting. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that, and my wife is kind of she's like I think I've done a couple of times where I'm like, hey, check out these houses in South Carolina, and,
Hey, let me
and
know.
yeah.
I'll be happy to be your real estate agent down here. I will be more than happy.
No,
Would love to
and
have you down here.
it's lovely. I think one of the things that I've realized for myself is I think I'm a pretty introverted person, and being in a city where there's so many people on you like around you,
Mm,
it kind of
yeah,
forces me to be more of an extrovert because it's easy to like go meet somebody for coffee because it's like a 10-minute walk. It
yeah.
just having so many people on top of you makes it easier. Like in our building, we have 70 families in our one building, so it's like,
Okay,
the
yeah,
footprint is like 200 feet by 50 feet. I don't know how big it is, but it's not that big.
yeah,
But when you're in the backyard, there are people coming and going to the parking lot. So you just end up seeing people and talking to people. And for somebody who I think tends to be introverted like myself, having so many people
Oh,
around you
yeah.
kind of forces you out of your shell, which is like kind of an odd, like
Yeah.
I guess,
Interesting.
odd thing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
could definitely.
Yeah, so I know that you've got other things to do, and I appreciate you kind of sharing so much of the afternoon together.
None more enjoyable than this, I can tell you. Yeah.
Well, but thank you. And then I've been kind of
Thank
trying to
you.
think about like what like how to close out a podcast. And I don't I don't know where it goes from here, but like my feeling is just kind of like what gives you hope in the when at the end of the day, like what keeps you going.
Um, Kind of what I talked about with, when you were asking me about what was I nervous about my daughter,
Uh-huh.
and it's about the same with my son and with so many other things, is the foundation is good.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at the end of the day, it's going to be all right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that with this country
Mm-hmm.
and with this community and all the communities that I'm in, is I have a lot of faith and confidence that the foundation is really good. And that, yes, life is a struggle. So we have things we have to work through, but my confidence is is that the foundation is good. And so it's going to, things will work out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what gives me hope about the future, that that's going to be there for me, but also more importantly for my kids and their kids and your
Mm-hmm.
kids,
Mm-hmm.
is that. So
Yeah.
I hope I'm right. I hope I'm right.
Well, I think that it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think, if you start saying the good things, then it's good. Like if I could picture the conflicts with our kids where he's like, what, you're
Yeah.
tearing the family apart. Like it'd be very easy to kind of start saying the negative thing, and then it becomes a
Yeah.
self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think the other way also works. And I mean, I agree with you. I think that at the end of the day, I think that anybody that I've ever talked to, and if you just think about your actual real life interactions with people, everybody, people are struggling to get through this day, and we're all fallible.
Yeah.
We're all hypocrites. We all don't know what we're doing. We're emotional. We're unpredictable, and it's easier said than done for sure. I can say that here in the podcast with you. In real life, there are times when maybe you're just like, oh, like you don't want to do it. But I think with hope and with kind of belief in the, I guess, the fabric of the real fabric of the country, because I don't believe it's in the news. It's not it's not what's up above. It's us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
that I always find hope in, and just thinking about everyday
Yep.
use, the people who are just going about doing their job, the sanitation worker who's waking up every day to get the trash.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody's got a part to play, and I think that's the part that I find hope. And so I agree with you, and I
Oh,
thank
that's
you so
awesome.
much for sharing that.
Hey, you're welcome. Welcome.
So
This has been great.
yeah,
I'm honored, and I wish you all the deserved success with this.
all right. Well, all right. Thank you very much, Eric.
Hey, you're welcome.
Have a
Take
good
care,
day.
Michael.
All right.
You
Okay, you too.
too.
All right.